Hey everyone, this is Living for the Weeknight, and on today's episode, I am with Jules. So, Jules is an artist who is from Denmark, currently living in Berlin, and I want to give you absolutely no insight into what their artwork is just yet because it is just truly wonderful. Honestly, this episode was a real joy to record. It was actually very easy as well because Jules is just such an interesting person to listen to. So I felt like I actually didn't have to do much this episode and I could just let them talk. And yeah, really enjoyed editing this episode and listening back. And I'm sure you're all gonna love this episode as well as much as I did. But yeah, enjoy. So today I am with Jules, and how about it, Jules? Introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Hello.
What are you about? I don't know. Tell us something about you. Anything.
Hi, I'm Jules. I'm a Dane living in Berlin, trying to figure it all out and trying to make my way as a creative in this very harsh and cold world.
I feel like that. And what other place apart from Berlin to go and do that?
Right? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the best place for all the rejects and the outcasts.
And before we get on to kind of like your creative ventures and all of that, tell me when did you move to Berlin? What brought the move? Give a bit of history.
So I originally came to Berlin because I was finishing my bachelor's degree. I was studying aesthetics and culture up until last year, last autumn. And the opportunity presented itself in form of an exchange, which seems sort of like an easy sort of package deal in terms of fulfilling this dream that I had had for a while. I always wanted to move to Berlin, to be honest. Like every time I had visited, I felt super at home and just kind of at ease in the streets for some reason. Even though it's a bigger city than my hometown of Copenhagen. And yeah, I did the exchange and just decided to stay really because why not? Now I was here. I had started already planting some roots and I wanted to keep feeding those roots. And yeah, I've been here since February last year.
No.
So not too long, still a baby in Berlin terms.
Nice, nice. But the nice thing about Berlin is there are no grown-ups. There are adults, but I wouldn't say there are any grown-ups, so you're all good.
Exactly.
uh,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, tell me about aesthetics and culture. Like, what sort of degree is that? Can you tell me a bit about what you studied in that course and what you learned from it, or direction you went?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's an interesting thing because it's quite a niche study. It's actually only been around in Denmark since 1996, I want to say. So actually, that's the year I was born, right? So it's been around as long as I have, at least in forms of a choice to study in university, right? And it's a very broad field. Aesthetics is ultimately how do we perceive the world through all of our senses? And typically in normal conversation, when we say aesthetics, we're usually talking about something that's visually pleasing, but that's a very sort of narrow definition of the term. And originally, it was kind of learning about how to widen our vocabulary in how we perceive the world and how to do so through all of our senses. So it can kind of be applied to anything, really, which I think is the super, super fun part about it. And I love how broad of a field it is because with my with my grade in uni or my class, everyone really went different ways. And it was really fun to see how people sort of naturally applied aesthetics to their own interests, but kind of tunneled um, their different papers and projects into these very specific interests. And that also took away a competitive layer as well for like a uni class. We were more about supporting each other in finding those little tunnel holes and specific interests within the field of aesthetics rather than gatekeeping and um, yeah, like competing with each other. So that was really cool too. My personal like interest within it is like basically it's a mix of sort of art history, philosophy, literature, anthropology at times, sociology, um, and cultural history. So that's kind of, I would say, the more, um, I guess, the smaller studies that it spans across. Um, and yeah, my interest in it is mainly in the art uh, part, but I'm obsessed with how we use our senses physically to gather our own data on things. And I'm obsessed with like I'm so orally fixated. And so like how we present food, how we view food, for example, that is something I get really nerdy about. And I love when our different senses sort of cross. Um, so like for example, synesthesia is like it's basically when we see an image that makes us feel a certain thing through one of our other senses, right? Or it doesn't have to necessarily be an image, but like when one sense is triggered, but it's kind of triggering another sense. So like seeing a Burger King commercial and you see like the patty being grilled and the juicy, like how juicy it is. And you see these things that will basically activate your other senses to get your mouth watering and to get you hungry, right? That's synesthesia. And that's like something that I don't know, I'm just really obsessed with that. But I'm obsessed specifically with how art provokes those feelings. Um, and also kind of the opposite end of the visually pleasing things. I really like things that provoke and disgust us, and I'm very fascinated by that. So that's kind of my interest within it. But I've always had an intersectional, like feminist point of view um, in the different sort of projects that I've done throughout my studies. Um, and yeah, I'd love to sort of work with curating more around the senses in this like really, really hands-on kind of way, like more of a playful way, really.
And I guess the intersectional feminist will kind of come into like the culture aspect of the studying then.
100%. Yeah, 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 absolutely. It was a lens that I couldn't ignore and just sort of naturally gravitated towards because that can also be applied to literally everything. Um, and I found that that also gave me more of my own perspective on things as well. But I've written, I mean, papers on quite different subjects, but somehow they've kind of still kept a red thread through this cultural aspect of intersectional feminism. And that was kind of how a lot of people in my studies did it. They kind of held on to one thing, which would lead them into different directions, even if it was very different directions, but somehow still keep them on track. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. No, I love that. Already, I've got so many questions.
Yeah.
Firstly, I wanted to ask if you had, out of all the senses, if you had to pick one, what's your favorite sense?
Ooh, my favorite sense is ooh, that's a good one. Ooh, my initial thought was taste. My initial thought because I'm just a foodie through and through and like taste is just like one of my biggest drives in life, honestly. I'm like always thinking about what's the next thing I'm going to eat and drink and how can I spike my dopamine through doing that,
Yeah,
you know?
I'm always thinking about my next coffee or my next meal. Nothing else.
Exactly,
Nothing else ever.
exactly. But I would say that it's quite tied with sound because the magic of music and rhythm and melody, which I also know that you can relate to, right? It's
Yeah.
That's also super, super important. So I don't know, it's a bit of a tie between those two, but I think taste wins because that was my initial thought.
That's fairs. That's fairs, and I understand why music and sound is the next thing because after all, we met because of music.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think that's a running theme of my show. People are like, how do you meet? And it's like either Berlin or music. It's one
Yeah.
of the two.
I love that.
Yeah, people won't guess where the next guest I have is I met.
Yeah.
But no, that's really cool, and it's like there's so much, as you said, like it's nice that no one's gatekeeping in terms of ideas because there's so much to do with that. There's so much to create. There's so much to experience. Like incredible, really. And the next thing I wanted to ask is, you said you wrote some papers
Mhm.
regarding this. Can you tell me like a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was another really fun and cool part about my studies. It was actually that almost all of the papers we did write, we had practically free reign on. Like you come up with your own case, you choose entirely what subject matter you want to deal with, what kind of methods you want to use. Um, but it was always a form of analysis of something, right? And I love having free reins like that. That's how I thrive in projects. I don't like the confinement of too many like guidelines or structures or specific questions I have to answer. So that was like the fun part. And the first paper that I wrote, or the first like project that I did, it was actually it was a presentation on how mowing grass is an aesthetic experience. And so ultimately what my group did for this was that we ended up writing an entire poem on how meditative mowing grass and just like sensing freshly cut grass can be for some people. It's quite funny because one of the people in my group actually has a grass allergy, so she was the only one that really couldn't relate to this. But she played quite well along with the project, and we ended up doing this kind of um, I would almost say it was like borderline slam poetry
Hmm.
um, on yeah how relaxing mowing the lawn can be, how it can put you into a meditative state, how the smell of it, the sound of it, um, what kind of uh, memories can be triggered by that as well. So that was like one of the first projects we did. Um, that obviously doesn't necessarily have like an intersectional feminist point of view, but I just thought that was like a funny little um it was the very first thing we did actually. So that's why I don't know, I think it paints a good picture of like just how mundane aesthetics also can be. Um but I've written a paper on cultural appropriation in the fashion industry. Um, I have written a paper on um, a specific Billie Eilish Vogue cover.
Hmm.
This very notorious one where we see her sort of step out in this like a hyper feminine look for the first time in a corset, um, and how that was controversial in the media. That was actually like one of my favorite papers to write. I really enjoyed that, to be honest. And I ultimately compared this Vogue cover that she did, or like this editorial that she did for Vogue, with one of her own. Um, it wasn't a song, but it was like a an interlude kind of video that she did to sort of um, I don't know if this is the right term, but like slap back at the haters
Yeah.
um, of the like male gaze, basically. Um, and I did a comparison on that and the different like visual aesthetics, but also all the symbolics and um, like semantics that there also are around all these things. these components. And that kind of inspired what ended up being my thesis, actually, because I got super into how women are viewed in media, or I just got really obsessed with how women are portrayed in media, and also the correlations of that with gender identity. Because with this paper on Billie Eilish, I read Gender Trouble by Judith Butler,
Mm.
which is like, just sort of, I'd say a basic in anything. Like if you're at all interested in reading about gender identity and fluidity and also queerness, like in general, Judith Butler is the way to go. Like they are honestly a pillar when it comes to literature um, in those subjects. But yeah, that inspired my thesis, and I ended up writing my thesis on how myths and the myth of Medusa in particular has uh, played a role in how we perceive women in media today. And so with that, I kind of zoomed out and was looking at myths in general as like this form of this form of information, right? Like of sharing information, morals, ethics. These were things that could be portrayed in myths to kind of um, teach people on how to be, or social etiquette, these types of things, but also warn people on what not to do socially, even if it was with this entertaining sort of aspect. Um,
Red threads, as you
and
said.
yeah, exactly. And Medusa has always been a myth that I've felt very close to, because there's sort of there's some different versions of the myth, and there's a version of the myth that I choose to hold on to, and then there's the version that we see portrayed again and again and again in media. And one version of the myth, Medusa is actually sort of the victim and is a very, very misunderstood character. And then in the other version, she is this horrifying monster that's just out to turn people into stone. And she's a very misunderstood character. So I think that's why I was always drawn to her. Um, but it was just interesting to see sort of historically how myths and folklore and folk tales play into these preconceptions that we have on different genders in general. And when you look at mythology, so many of the female characters or female representing characters are these kind of devious, um, they're temptresses, they are devious, they're only out to like get things from male characters. They have a level of mystery, and they're untrustworthy, and kind of, well, there's always a level of them being the enemy, really. um
Sounds like it was written by a male.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Doesn't it
it
sound
kind of
like what we
sounds like
see right now?
that.
Sounds a bit too familiar.
Exactly. Yeah, and I just think, that's obviously that's the history that has repeated itself. It's that all of these stories really are told by men originally, right? But it's so interesting to see how they've added on in layers throughout the years through different interpretations to this myth, and like completely changed a storyline to something else entirely. Um, yeah, that's like a little pluck of some of the things I've done. I've also been a bit more hands-on in terms of like the arts with my studies. We curated an entire exhibition
Hmm.
um, where the theme of it was actually, um, I don't know if I'm translating this correctly, but like archives from the future. That was kind of our
Yeah.
our theme of it. And this again was up for interpretation. And my group and I, we created living like bio art. So we made a fuck ton of mold. Oh, oops, sorry, can I
No,
say
yeah, you
that?
can swear. Like, look, there's trust,
um,
trust me, there's no
we
monetization on this
made
podcast.
a whole lot of mold in different forms,
Yeah,
actually. And then this was kind of where my obsession with like things that are gross, like
yeah.
finding the beauty in the gross, you know? And so we made a bunch of mold and aestheticized it in different ways, and ended up
Wait?
making
Can I just
something
stop you
so
there?
beautiful. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask how do you actively make mold?
So my my method that worked the best, because we were trying to create different forms of mold as well. We had a buttload of petri dishes, and I was basically just mixing everything from like my own spit. Like I was like spitting into things. I was like spitting onto fruit. I would like chew on it and then like mix things, gurgle things, spit them out into a petri dish, and then try to do so in different combinations of things so that we could get different forms of growth ultimately in different colors and stuff. So it was like in one petri dish there might be some yogurt mixed with like mashed banana or like some tuna brine, or I don't know. I was just trying to mix some very foreign things together to create something. And it ended up giving us quite a wide range of like color palettes and
Hmm.
textures, different furs and things to like ultimately display.
Yeah,
Um, and that was definitely one of my favorite parts of that project. It was just trying to create mold.
that is amazing. Like, I did not expect you to say that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad
Well,
I
it
asked the
turns out if you
question.
mix it with your natural enzymes, that will also break down the whatever it is much faster as well. So that
Oh yeah,
also helps in producing everything because we were working against time when it came to that.
yeah. That sounds incredible. And sorry, continue. What were you creating with it?
So so we ended up sort of displaying this mold in different ways, and we had created these petri dishes which we ended up sealing and then creating chains out of, and we had this entire wall that was sort of um it was lined up with a window so that the lighting hit this wall of these petri dishes in this very very gorgeous way. And from afar it didn't look like it's petri dishes full of moldy spit and food. Like it really looked gorgeous. It kind of looked like these quite kitsch, these like decorative things people have had in their doorways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of giving that vibe, but with a tinge of like disco. And
Ah,
then we
disco
also
mold.
had um we took some different pictures of the mold that we had grown, and I did a bunch of edits on these pictures, and a lot of it was close-ups, so you actually can't really see that it's, for example, a moldy strawberry that it's an image of. But with different editing I blew it up and basically made these posters that turned out so good. They turned out so good, and it was so fun to see people really get up close to these things and be like, wait, what is that? And then like, oh, like, wait, isn't that's actually mold? Like that's kind of gross, but I'm like right up in it and
That's
I'm loving what I'm seeing, you know?
people like just very close to what is actually your spit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I loved that. Like it was so fun to see. And then we also did we basically made a bunch of sculptures that we also put more of these um let's call them bio material on these sculptures, and then had that grow mold on the sculptures. But then we did different sort of display cases. Some of them had chia seeds growing, like chia pets growing off of them. So we were working with growth in different ways, but also this concept of like cyclical life.
Hmm.
to sort of feed into the overall theme of everything. Like how you cannot archive something that's living, but what's living in these petri dishes or on the sculptures is going to change through time in itself. And that's what I thought was so fun to play with. So that was also something that we did during my studies, which I just loved that.
And
That was so,
it relates so well to the five senses as well.
yeah.
And it's no, that's incredible. That sounds so cool. Like you said a lot of cool things, but honestly, the mold that's just awesome. Like
Yeah.
I found the mowing grass really cool as well because I'd never really thought about the sensation of doing what is a household task in terms of the feeling on the senses with smell, with like also just sight as well, and color of this and the
Yeah.
sounds or just everything about it. It's yeah, no, you do a lot of cool stuff. It's pretty awesome.
It's no, but it's actually what you're saying about sort of finding those little bits in like everyday things, right? That has made me realize that I've taken my studies with me so much more than I was expecting to. Like I apply it way more than I was expecting to in my daily life because I look at my morning coffee ritual of like
Mm,
me heating up the milk and frothing the milk. Like I see it as a ritual and I see it as like an aesthetic experience. I'm doing something nice for myself. I'm improving the coffee that I'm making at home instead of going out to buy one. I sort of romanticize it. It gives me a moment of solitude as well once I've finished the coffee. It's like there's these other things that feed into it. And that's the aesthetics of life. I mean, that sounds a bit like, I don't know if that's a bit cringe to say, but
no, it's
I love
not.
finding these little aesthetic moments in my sort of mundane.
It's
Yeah.
no, that's
Uh,
awesome. It's also like mindfulness too. It's
yeah.
taking that time to like I don't know, just like zone out of thinking about other things, but then engage with all the senses in one go. And then even though some might say the process is similar each day, you at the end it's a different experience. How much do
Yeah.
you grind? How different is the grind of the beans? How different is the way you froth the milk, for example? The aromas are how different is your health on the day and what you feel from it.
Absolutely.
Awesome, awesome. No, this sounds really cool. We should talk more about this again in the
Yeah.
future, and now, of course. Yeah.
There was a group on the first day that they chose coffee as their
Mm.
sort of thing to aestheticize.
Yeah.
And it was a big hit. It was a big hit.
No, that's so cool. Like honestly, this your studies sound really awesome. Because I remember briefly asking you about them before, but I didn't know the extent. Like super cool.
Yeah.
And
No, I love getting nerdy about it, honestly. I really do enjoy explaining it to people now that I fully understand. I mean, I don't know if anyone will fully understand the scope of it, but now that I have a stronger background in it and feel more confident in it, I love being able to point out the aesthetics of things,
yeah.
like especially in sort of everyday moments, because it brings a lot of gratitude with it as well.
Oh, it absolutely does. It's no, yeah, that's really cool. And given kind of your study background, what do you kind of what are you gonna do for it for the future? You've told us about the past.
Yeah.
What is your future archive?
So my future is right now I'm trying to form a path towards making an art collective, and I want that art collective to highlight art in all of its forms. We're talking music, we're talking visual arts, we're talking design, um, sustainable design, upcycling, um, poetry, um, or even just, yeah, literature in
Hmm.
general. I want to create a space that can highlight these different art forms, but in a way that makes sense with each other. So ultimately, a multidisciplinary art collective. But before I even get there, I want to start with making events first, to kind of not only create a specific network for that art collective, but like to get the ball rolling really.
Yeah.
Um, and I would love to be the curator of these events because I have a really gorgeous network of people here in Berlin. Again, it's the place for the outcasts and the artists. And I know so many wonderful artists here who are multi-talented and don't just stick within one medium or one field. Like they they write, maybe they write poetry but also design clothes, but also sing,
Mm.
or maybe they tattoo and upcycle different designs and also do nail art. Like the mishmash of these different talents, I think, is so freaking cool. And I really want to create a platform for this network so that they can meet each other, but also so that these people can um, be put on a pedestal for the world to see. Like, I feel like I know some people who are really just unique artists, and I really want to make a platform for their voices to be heard. And I love being the facilitator and
Mm.
organizer of things. So that's why I want to be this sort of curating mind behind it. And then I might, this is still in my considerations, be a bit of the food aspect of it too,
Yeah.
because um, I can't help it. I just, there has to be a level of food and bev in this sort of idea. And well, I would love to do the catering of it if I have capacity for that as well. But that's maybe a bit further down the line when there's when the other things are in order first.
I feel that. I feel that. If you on the spot had to pick, you're creating your event. You've got all of these artists. You're in charge of doing something related to food and beverages, as you said. What food groups on instinct and what beverages would you pick?
Okay, so my go-to would be that it would be sort of aperitivo style,
Yeah.
because not only does that make sense for this style of event, people can snack on something, drink something while they are looking at what's exhibited and while they're mingling and networking, right? So something along those lines. And for the longest time, I've had this idea of um, getting really playful with the elements that we would eat. So again, with this idea of synesthesia in mind, I would want to create something that maybe looks like one thing, but when you taste it or experience it, you're going to have a completely different sensorial experience. Because I
Mm.
kind of want to play with it and create a space for people to be curious. I want them to go up to the table of snacks and not just chow down until there's
Mm.
nothing left. I want them to actually be like, wait, what is that? Can I eat this? Or is this to be eaten? Or should I drink it? Or what are we working with here? I want to see that. I want to activate that curiosity. Um, so I feel like aperitivo style snacks would be a good sort of threshold for that to happen. Um, with drinks, I mean, my first thought was martinis. And I know that really isn't like playful in any sort of way, but um, I would go for sort of more, not classic martinis, but like do something like pickle martinis, olive martinis, like play with um, different alcohols that I would flavor. Like maybe it would be a Bloody Mary martini, but the vodka that I'm using or the gin that I'm using in that martini has actually been washed and flavored with Bloody Mary ingredients to create a surprise element when you drink it, right? You see it and oh, it's just a martini, but then you sip it and it actually has a much broader palette.
Mm.
So playing with those elements. And then I've just always wanted to basically bake bread that I can hang off of things and shape it in fun ways so that that's also an interactive element on the table, that when you go to break a piece of bread, it's not just on a platter or something. Maybe it's hanging from the ceiling, or it's actually a sculpture that you're looking at and you're like, oh wait, can I eat this? Should I be eating this? But the point is, yes, I want you to be eating this, you know. um yeah, I
That's
hope that
super
answers the
cool.
question.
No, it
Yeah.
does. It does. One thing I immediately thought of was like, when was the last time you went to eat something and it felt like something completely different? Anything to mind? Because I asked that because I'm struggling to remember when I have,
Hmm.
and like honestly, these concepts you're telling me about are things I've never ever thought about in my life, and they just sound
Hmm.
really cool. Like I even think about how at the start you talked about seeing beauty in disgusting things and thinking about food in that way. Like not to not I was going to say something, but I think it would be too gross to say. But imagine, I don't know, you're going to eat something and it just looks like something you never should eat or would eat in a million years,
Yeah.
but then it tastes like fantastic. Or
Yeah.
how awesome would that be? And like, I'm just curious by like
Right?
the human mind interaction of that, because people have registered themselves to think it would be disgusting in the first place. Are they going to immediately hold back and like act like it's disgusting before recognizing the flavors? Like, how would that even go? It sounds cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I don't know. I can't help but think about just the reason why we use food dye in cold cuts, right?
Hmm.
An actual slice of ham or something like that wouldn't be pink as we see it on the shelves of the supermarket. There's other additives to sort of preserve it as such, so that it looks more inviting. Because if we see a gray slab of meat, that just isn't going to look very appetizing. But why is that? Because that gray slab of meat is still going to taste the same and just as good as the one that's colored, but our mind just tells us that it's not inviting enough because there isn't enough vibrancy in it. And that's also an interesting sort of, like, I mean, I don't know, this might, I don't know if this is like a theory that is based off of things that I've read or if it's just from my own mind. So bear with me. But in terms of eating more nutrition and eating more colors, right? That's kind of usually what is going to tell us there's more variety in a meal and therefore also more nutrition. If it lacks colors, then that's maybe also a reason why it doesn't look inviting enough, because it
Hmm.
just doesn't look like it's going to be sustenance enough or like full of enough vitamins for us. Um, but to answer your question, uh, the funny thing is the first thing that sprung to mind is actually a dish that I myself have not eaten,
Hmm.
but I haven't stopped thinking about it since it was described to me.
Go
Can
on.
I use that as an example?
Please do, because then I want to think about it and see if it's going to intrude my
So
headspace forever.
basically, I had to experience this restaurant vicariously through my ex. My ex managed to get to go to The Alchemist,
Hmm.
which, yeah, I think was like the best restaurant in the world at some point, or is in the like top five of restaurants. I'm not quite sure what the ranking is currently, but it's this restaurant in Copenhagen that's very notorious and it's extremely theatrical. And one of the dishes that they ate was this basically what looked like a snowball,
Mm-hmm.
but they said that like by taking a bite of it, it tasted like the most peak season summer ripe tomato that they'd ever
Oh,
had. Like every like imagine just the most it's the most perfect tomato on peak season, you know,
yeah.
which is also, by the way, one of my favorite things in the whole wide world. Um, and yet in a snowball form, right? So it
Yeah.
you sort of you see this, you expect something else, not obviously texturally it can't mimic the tomato, but the flavor and also getting so much flavor into ice as well
Yeah.
is quite difficult. So I haven't stopped thinking about this dish because I want to know the techniques behind it. I want to figure out how do they pack so much punch into ultimately what's kind of like an ice granita.
Mm.
And I also just want to know what the thoughts behind it were. But it was like a funny way of encapsulating summer. And this was also a dish that was eaten, I think it was like February or something
Mm.
when this was experienced. So kind of an homage to the peak summer season, right? But in this icy, wintry way. And I love the juxtaposition of the concept. I love the contrasts of it all. Um, and I really do think about it often, like surprisingly often, and I didn't even experience it myself.
I'm not
But
sure.
that's how nerdy I get with these things. Like I
No.
haven't stopped thinking about it, and I don't know, maybe at some point I just need to try and develop a recipe to play with it.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. Just as you said as well, just the inspiration for how you decided to develop something like that. I always love kind of like how artistic form can come about because
Mm-hmm.
it could always be something that's like really well thought through or something that's been inspired from experiences in the real world or even dreams or whatever. And then sometimes on the off chance, it has just come out of a moment of madness or like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Sometimes,
that's also so fun, right? It's
yeah,
when it comes out of madness or just truly out of, pulling it out of your ass. Like this is maybe a strange parallel, but I'm just thinking about like sometimes my best outfits
mm,
are the ones that were thrown together in the most moment of stress. I was just out on the way out of the door, should have left, 10-15 minutes ago, threw something together. And then when I leave, I'm like, wait, this is actually, this is pretty good. Like,
yeah.
how did I think of this? And it's because I didn't think,
Those are the best
oh,
times.
you know?
The power of like your wardrobe where you've owned maybe a lot of stuff for a long time, never thought to put it together, and then it just fits.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's always those moments of like, wait, I've never combined these two pieces that I've had for years. And
Yeah.
then suddenly I did, and everything made sense. And then that unlocks more ideas, which I also truly love.
Yeah, and it's well, to be fair, every time I've seen you, you're always wearing the most like amazing fashion. I
Oh,
think
stop. Thank you.
I think well that's basically how we met. Like we met on my birthday and
Yeah.
you were wearing a great top by I remember you gave me the Instagram account of the person who actually gave you the top made by Celeste, I believe.
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's also shout out to Celeste. This is one of my friends and who's a designer, a poet, and an artist all around who I would love to showcase in one of these future events. Shout out to Celeste, made by Celeste. Find them on Instagram, follow them, buy their clothes.
The
Just
clo-
do it. You'll be very happy.
the clothes are awesome. Like when I see like a new post, I'm like, this looks cool. And then I'm always thinking, how
Yeah,
do they do this though? I don't understand. I'm like, I've always thought about it a long time. Like, but how are they making this? This is so cool.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, like it's slow fashion. It's just them creating these pieces. And it's a lot of it is also upcycling pieces, and I love their sort of um their way of combining unexpected pieces together.
Yeah.
Like they did this series of t-shirts where it's like different t-shirts, everything from football jerseys to just old sort of graphic tees, but then sewing on bras onto these
Mm,
t-shirts. And it's like some of them, it's such a contrast of the lace on top of the sporty material, for example, but it just fucking works and it looks so cool. And it's like unisex designs, all of it. And I I truly believe in their designs. Big shout out to Celeste.
oh, definitely. But no, that sounds so cool. And I think I recall like going back to your sense of style and fashion. Am I misremembering, or did you also do like some stylist work?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I've done like a little handful of stylist work. Some of it was a bit more passion projects. Back in Denmark, I worked with two good friends of mine who had a company at the time, and did some stylist work with them. Um, and yeah, some odd sort of photo shoots here and there. Um, and then my, I mean, my friends and family probably consider me their stylist because I take it very seriously. Like it's
Mm.
down to if you're staying at my place and you need a sweater or something because it's chilly while you're here, I'm not just gonna give you any hoodie. Like I will match it to your outfit. Like that, I don't know. It's just I can't not do it.
Yeah.
um, and I love dressing my friends up. I love dressing people up. I love seeing their face when you've kind of pushed maybe one of their own boundaries in terms of how they dress or express themselves, but seeing the face of like, oh wait, I really fuck with that,
Yeah.
or the surprise that can come with it. I think I have a quite a good talent for knowing where people want to go with their ideas or how they want to dress, um, and being able to execute that. And I love especially if it's older people like my mom's generation or um, like my grandmother, because you can expand their minds a bit on how to work with different pieces. And um, I've always considered myself a librarian to my mother's wardrobe because she can call me and be like, "Oh, I have this event. What should I wear?" I'm like, "Oh, you can do this and this." And she'll be like, "What is that?" I'll be like, "Go in the back of your closet. Like, you have this certain piece, try it on." And then being able to play with it. I'm just like, I want to play with all these things, you know?
Yeah. Ah, you need to come see my wardrobe and pick out all the bits
Yeah.
I'm not using because there's a lot, and then figure it out.
You have a great wardrobe though as well. And every time I've seen you, you've always worn like such slay outfits.
Thank you.
Like you're always coordinating it, and I love it.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad you didn't meet me like 5 years ago. Yeah, yeah, it wasn't good back then. It wasn't good.
Hey,
Uh,
we all gotta start somewhere.
we all got to start somewhere. Exactly, exactly. Do you think you'd ever want to work in the fashion space alongside all the other arts or incorporate it into your art?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, absolutely. I think as well, I've had I've had a lot of retail experience, and like uh in general, I'm always going to be drawn to fashion, and I think that's also a parallel or a form of art that follows. I love to see how it affects culture, but how culture affects it back, right? And there's always this ping pong between the arts and culture and fashion, um, and especially with the way that micro trends happen faster and faster because of the internet, and like how quickly things will get mass produced after um, going viral.
Hmm.
um, I think it's important to hold on to fashion, and especially to um, like secondhand fashion, or like looking at what we've already produced and having fun with that. And um, I mean, I would love to do more stylist gigs, absolutely. Like I really, really, really enjoy it. And yeah, if anyone's out there looking for a stylist, here I am.
I'm sure there's many, many people looking for a stylist, and yeah, your fits are always great. You're dressed great right now. It was the first thing I said to you before we started recording.
Yeah, thank you.
No, it's I kind of wish I would dress good now. I just like throw on a white t-shirt and shorts. And I'm like, it's hot in here in
But I
my
feel like
bed.
that's a statement for you as well. Like it's giving statement, and I like it. I like
Oh,
it. It's
thank you,
working.
thank you. So another thing I kind of wanted to ask, so you do a lot of artistic projects. You've got a lot of just history within the arts, doing so many different things. I think I recall as well you're writing poetry too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do write poetry, but I have never released any of my
Ah,
poetry. Like that truly has just been a me project. However, I'm starting to get a little tinkering that I
Mm.
might want to put something out there.
It's art for yourself at the
Yeah.
moment, but maybe in the future, yeah. No, that sounds like really awesome too. But yeah, you're always doing so many things, so many things. And with regards to that, I wanted to ask, how do you balance it all? How do you and you don't need to give the you don't necessarily need an answer for it, because the one thing I've
Mhm.
learned from this podcast is whenever I ask people how do you balance it, a lot of people don't really have an answer. I don't have an
Yeah.
answer, and my podcast is meant to be about this.
No, I love that. Honestly, the funny thing about it is that I think sorry, I'm just like taking off my shoes. I don't
No,
know
no,
if you can hear.
that's totally fine.
I mean, there's one factor that plays into it, and I think that's kind of the way my brain is structured, right? Like very ADHD brain of like I start many things at once and do many things at once because that's how I'm wired, but also just what ends up working for me. It can also shoot me in the foot sometimes because if I don't have an overview of everything that I started, some things might get lost along the way. But more often than not, I manage to circle back and pick things up and finish things. But um, I think that plays a role in like balancing it because I kind of don't even give myself the chance to consider how to balance things. It's just, oh, well, I have this idea, I want to start it right now. I have this idea, I want to start it right now. So that definitely plays a big role in it. But I do try to practice more mindfulness, especially like this past year has been
Hmm.
extremely hectic. Um, so I've been trying to start these things, these ideas with the more mindfulness behind it and actually with more intention of finishing them as well and like maybe one by one so that it doesn't become this massive snowball, right? But it's still a smaller snowball building up to something bigger. And yeah, I mean, I think at some point I always get to a stage of like kind of burnout from all of my ideas like buzzing
Hmm.
and whizzing in my mind, but I have a notebook on me at all times, and that has genuinely been like the biggest difference in everything, in structuring everything for me, because I write down things faster when I get the ideas, and I know that they'll be there safe for another time, so that I don't feel the stress and pressure of myself trying to start them while they're still fresh. Um, I think that's honestly just like having a journal, journaling about ideas and forming ideas in that way that has really kept more of a balance in it all because it's like being able to press pause on the idea and then you can get back to it after you've been to work or
Hmm.
been job searching or whatever one might be doing, you know?
It's the best way to do things, to be honest, because otherwise you can just let it run wild and ruminate in your head forever, which is exhausting.
Yeah.
Because I remember you telling me you had a notebook, and one thing I've done recently is I bought a whiteboard that I've stuck on my fridge. So
Yeah.
anytime there's something I have to do, I write it on the whiteboard. I might not get to it for like 6 months even, or a long time, but it's there and it's no longer
But
in my
it's
head.
there. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's changed my life. It really has. It's changed my life
Yeah.
so much. So I feel you with that, because I don't think we're meant to be. We're not meant to be keeping everything in here. No,
No.
that's why we
No, no,
invented
no.
paper.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Like that's it's it's um it's also just nice to be able to like to kind of save them for another day. I mean, often with with the poetry that I write, um sometimes just one sort of line comes to mind and I'll write that down and I don't like I'll just write that one line down.
Hmm.
And then when I'm sitting down feeling maybe I've had my aesthetic coffee ritual in the morning or something, and I have this like moment, then suddenly more words will come flowing to me, and then I can go back to that idea and add on to it or edit it or work on it. Um, but typically it always just starts with maybe one or two lines that kind of come at a random time, and I have to write them down right away, otherwise bye bye. um, I learned that the hard
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
That's ultimately where the sort of journal on me at all times came from, because even my notes app, it's not quite the same
Mm.
as writing it out in hand.
Yeah.
um
Things get lost
and
in notes.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, and then the rest will come later, because typically those ideas are just the tip of the iceberg, and then I need to chew and digest on my own idea before I form it
Yeah.
more. Yeah.
But another question I have for you, because it kind of comes out of some of how I feel sometimes when I'm trying to pursue things. Do you
Hmm.
ever feel time pressured to do things, even though in theory there is no time limit?
Yeah, absolutely. um Actually, a really good example of this is this bread idea that I was speaking of before, of like baking bread in different shapes and being able to hang it off of things and create sculptures out of it. That has been an idea that I think maybe it was an idea my mom and I spoke about years ago. And like I jotted it down in a notebook ages ago. Um, I used to do, my mom's a chef, and I used to do a lot of catering with her. So we've developed recipes together. And I've generally like helped her out a lot with some of her cookbooks and stuff like this. So we kind of were ping ponging and came up with this idea of like, I think it was originally a chain of bread, like baguette bread, and basically baking it in this way to create this, yeah, a chain of it.
Mm.
And a couple months ago, I opened my Instagram, and a catering company that I was following had simply made a chain out of baguette bread. And I was like,
Whoa.
oh my God, like I was really excited about it. I was actually really, really happy to see it. I was like, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
It was a good idea. However, I didn't manage it myself before someone else did. And so that kind of reminded me that there can still be a deadline on some of these ideas if I want them to be the fresh perspective
Hmm.
that I think they are. Um, However, with that being said, um, I don't have any deadlines coming up.
Yeah.
Like with the things that I'm slowly forming, everything is still quite in a brainstorming stage. And um, with that, I think there's a lot of value in taking time to like better form these ideas also with other people, because all this stuff won't be things that I do on my own,
Mm.
there's going to be a team behind it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, to be honest, it's as you said, like sometimes there is the case of you wanting to give a fresh perspective with it. But I think like the most important thing I was told recently is don't burn yourself out with it. Like
Yeah,
that's the first important thing, because you don't want to lose the interest for it at the end of the day. And kind of like with that question, my next question is, how do you keep yourself motivated with all these new art ideas? Like, what kind of drives you? What drives you?
that's actually a really good question. It's like a beautifully simple question, but you've really got my mind ticking right now, actually. Um, Honestly, I think it's just I keep on using this term of like playfulness, right?
Mm,
And I think in recent years, I've made a very conscious decision to sort of, I want to feed my inner child, and I want to do things for myself that I feel like I wasn't able to when I was a kid or when I was younger.
yeah.
And a lot of that is like having a space to just play and be weird and wacky in, and experiment in and do so in a way that's maybe not socially acceptable or whatever, but that I can accept, that I feel free in. Um, and so these ideas, I feel like because they're so driven by this like sense, this need to play,
Mm.
that need is not going to die out for me, like that's always going to be there, and that's kind of the drive behind these ideas. And I'm lucky that I know some people and am involved with people who have this same need for like curiosity and playfulness, even as adults, because the majority of people, at least here in Berlin, at least in my network, I mean, almost everyone is a creative or an artist in some form or aspect, but kind of next to a day job or
Mm.
next to a night job or a job that doesn't necessarily correlate with maybe everything they want to be doing. But that's the reality of trying to make ends meet, um and also what it means to be an artist, just like in general in today's society, right? Because
Yeah.
it's still not going to be the way to the riches, not necessarily. But that drive and need for playfulness and curiosity, I think, yeah, that will always be there, and that will always keep these ideas alive until I execute them. And hopefully that will just ricochet and then like ping pong off of more ideas and
Yeah.
keep the whole ball rolling. Like that's how I sort of see it.
I I love that, to be honest. Like it's simple words need to play, but it's so innocent as well, but it's so true. And I kind of feel like as we get older, that kind of like almost inner child desire to play, it gets bigger. If anything, you kind of get older and start wanting to play more, wanting to feel that
Yeah.
ambition, which is quite a beautiful thing. We start off as children playing, finding out about the world, and then ultimately we don't actually stop. We don't stop, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think there's such a beauty in that. And I think as well, not enough adults maybe view their curiosity of things with enough childlike wonder. There's still sort of this sense of like maybe holding back on things because you don't want to be too silly when you do it, or um, maybe it goes against how whatever company you work for might see you, or I don't know what it possibly could be, but like often there's sort of a sense of like, oh, we still need to keep some form of composure or something just because we're adults. But why?
Yeah,
Like, really, why? That curiosity never ends. It's just how we conform to sort of maybe hide that curiosity, um or how we conform to just never feed into that curiosity. And I want to open that up
yeah.
again for adults. I want adults to play until the day they die,
Mm.
like there's no need to hold back on these things no matter what it is, because I find myself and a lot of my friends, we're all kind of, we're in our late 20s, early 30s, and everyone's naturally regressing back to hobbies they've had as children. Everyone's naturally regressing back to maybe styles they wore as teens and tweens, like, mind you, still with a level of like upgradedness or
Yeah.
like maturity maybe, but sort of regressing back. But regressing is actually, I don't like that word in this sense, because
Turning back
it's not
time.
a step back, it's more of like a step into yourself again, I
Yeah.
think. And there's a lot of affirmation in that, in like, oh wow, these are truly core values or parts of me as a human being. Maybe I do know myself a little bit better than I thought I did.
Yeah.
And maybe it wasn't a phase, mom. Maybe I do actually dress like this. You know what I mean? Like I love I love seeing that, and I want to feed into that. I want people to feel more comfortable doing that.
Absolutely, because why? why should we have to change in a way over time of conformity to society or whatever the fuck it
Exactly.
is? It's I don't know, just be happy, do what you
Yeah.
want to do, like explore. I think you'd agree with this, but it's kind of why I love the music scene. It's what I love about
Yeah,
Berlin as well. It's like a playground. It's like people are being
absolutely.
silly, people are being stupid, people, yeah, they're people are just being. It's great.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's so fun to see, in settings like that as well, in the music scene, in club scenes, when you take away the layers of society and all the conventions and rules that we normally play by, you see people step out in a different light, and I love that, also the layer of surprise, not being able to necessarily have like a prejudice or a preconceived notion of who someone might be because they're not wearing the business suit they usually wear 9 to 5 every
Mm.
day, but they're wearing a cute little kinky outfit or something like. But that element of surprise and being like, oh well, I'm actually an accountant, but here I am, and I'm here to play because not everything is about, the straight path. And I love that. I love that. That's also a gorgeous sort of play space, right? That the music scene can bring or clubbing can bring. And I think that's kind of the more socially acceptable playground
Yeah.
in general for adults, right? Um, but we need more of it outside of those dark spaces. And we
Yeah.
need more of it like out in the open, I think.
Like in the light, just
Yeah,
yeah, we just need to give less of a fuck, to be honest.
exactly.
It's kind of like it's what I actually really enjoyed about Latin America because although okay, maybe it's not all fun and play all the time, but there felt like there was more play in general, whether it's for you music and just culture and it's out in the open and people are
Yeah.
more vibrant, don't give much of a fuck. It's kind of nice to see. Yeah, I think we're a bit
I
different
have
in
a question
Europe.
for you, actually.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I'm curious to know, when was the last time you felt like you were in a sort of play space, let's call it, or a playground, but which wasn't in the music scene or
Mm.
in a form of nightlife? Like, when was the last time you experienced that in in the light?
I guess honestly, backpacking. Um,
Yeah.
like I'd say, when you backpack, it's almost you are in the real world, but it's almost like you're not. You're in this space where you're away from anyone you know, any family, anything that's holding you back, anything like that fear of what will people think, blah blah blah, all that bullshit.
Mhm.
Because I just have all these memories of like I don't know, being in Bolivia or being in Mexico or Argentina or wherever, going on a hike with people who I've just met and being really dumb and saying
Mhm.
stupid stuff. And, I have like this memory where we're on the like salt flats in Bolivia, which are absolutely gorgeous. And we are just being incredibly stupid about things. Like, it's not like, oh my God, like we took in the beauty. We did take in the beauty, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
But just like taking silly photos, having these silly
Yeah.
moments together, really playing, like, even to the extent like I didn't go to Machu Picchu myself, but I know plenty of people who backpacked with me who did, and
Yeah.
people just like some of the photos I saw and some of the things they did. Like, I'm not going to repeat what it is on this podcast, but I'm just
Yeah.
like I love it because that's out in the bright open world.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful. And that's reminding me of as well that nature is kind of, that's, I guess that's really our playground, right? Of because this nature can really like open up a curiosity as well in us, no matter what age we have, right? And I can't help but think about this. I went on a walk with a friend the other day where we were just yapping, 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 and suddenly we're, going down different twists and bends in this park, and then we're in the forest, and then suddenly we're exploring trees, and we were climbing and jumping, and like it felt like being a kid again,
Yeah,
and I was enjoying it so much because we were just talking shit, talking about everything and nothing, while petting literal moss on trees, and jumping up on tree trunks and climbing different rocks and like finding things on the ground and being like, oh, what's that? And like ripping off a leaf, and just like again, sort of just playing in the nature, in the natural playground that there is. But it happened so organically because we felt comfortable, but also just like this need for it, I think.
Yeah.
And when you do so as well with a friend, with a person, like I love that sort of ping pong of um of play. It's like, oh, look at this. Oh, look what I found. Like, oh my God, what's that over there? Like opening each other's eyes up to different things and stuff. That's also just such a good play space.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. I think that should be the message of this podcast. Go play more.
Go
Like
play more.
go
Yeah.
play more. Go get inspired. If you got a thought of something, oh that might be fun, go ahead. Go do it. Why not?
Yeah,
What's the worst that's gonna happen? Yeah.
exactly.
I love that. I actually think this is a beautiful note to end on. It's
Yeah.
it's been really good interviewing you. Like this has gone by really fast, and I think this might be one of my longest episodes.
It went by so fast for me as well. Like I'm actually really surprised to see what time it is. I'm genuinely surprised
Yeah,
that we've
it's
been talking
oh
for this
wow.
long.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
long my tech problems went on for, but yeah, I think we've been like yeah, actually talking for a while. I have one final question for you though, and it's
Mhm.
not actually no, I have two final questions. The first one is where like you wrote papers as well in the past. Have these been published anywhere? Anywhere people can read them, or is it kind of like private stuff?
None of them have been officially published by my uni or anything
Yeah.
like that. But maybe this book that we've done, has that been published? It hasn't been published,
Okay.
actually, now come to think of it.
The reason I ask is if there's any form of your art pieces you want to shout out, or people can find it somewhere, feel free. If
Ooh, I
but
wish. Yeah, I
but if
haven't I haven't facilitated that yet. So
but if
maybe
not,
just my Instagram handle. If people want to follow me, I mean, honestly, because I post a bit of this, a bit of that. I like to think of my Instagram as
yeah,
a bit of a portfolio kind of, but also just for a bit more of my daily scribbles and sometimes even a little recipe or two,
yeah, no,
some food inspo.
I'll definitely tag you in the social media post. But for people who don't follow my Instagram for my podcast, what's your Instagram handle if you want to shout it out?
My Instagram handle is Instagram. My Instagram handle
Instagram.
is Jula Voda, JULAVODA. And please go follow and stay tuned because there are upcoming projects. And I don't know if I should say this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. I'm working on this idea of a food Instagram,
Mm,
basically, for recipes, recipe development, and then also reviews. Um, and so stay tuned on my main account if you're interested in that.
love that. Love that. I was thinking as well when I do the social media post, if you have any pictures of the mold, I can include that so that everyone can see.
Ooh, oh my God, yeah.
Or I can overlay
Actually,
it on
yeah,
the video
that's a
too.
really
And
good
I
idea.
can do both. I can put it on the social media post and overlay it on the video too.
Sweet, that would be really good. No, I would love that
Yeah.
because I genuinely I'm so proud of that project. Like that was so much fun. Um, and this is kind of a little, I guess, a little PSA as well that I'm just now thinking of. I don't know how that will fit in, but um, that idea was inspired from an art exhibit that I had experienced. So it wasn't a completely original idea of like using mold as an element in the piece, but it just fed into the theme so well. And I took an inspiration from a different artist who used kombucha
Ooh.
mothers basically as like this kind of living element to their art. Um, but I also don't remember their name, so I don't know if that's a shout out that's worth it.
Shout out to kombucha person. Sorry,
Kombucha person, yeah.
kombucha person. See, that's me playing. That's me being silly. Go play.
Yeah.
Go play. But no,
Love
this has
it.
been great. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I've really loved having you on. It's been a good episode to record, and it's always great
Thank
talking
you
to you as
so
normal.
much. No, seriously, thank you so much for having me. And I feel so seen by you. I feel so seen by you. And I really, really appreciate that because I am in the early beginnings of my sort of career, creative career. And it only takes one person to yeah, make me feel so seen. So thank you so much for that. Seriously, I really appreciate it.
No, no, absolutely. It was absolutely great having you on.